Compared with the birds, these days we're getting very good at flying. For us, it's high speed, high tech, very complicated. And yet, when we know what to look for, it's all there in nature. This bird is naturally a perfectly developed flying machine, and its perfection is in its wings. They keep it airborne and at the same time move it forward by beating back and forth. First of all, we tried to fly like the birds. Energy is the problem. We don't have anything like enough available. It seems that to fly by ourselves, we'd need breast muscles 6 feet across. Today, even though we know the problems, a few glorious spirits persist.
These wings can beat with a sufficient air supply at 90 strokes per minute, and at that point, it is calculated, using the 10 horsepower, this machine would be able to achieve a takeoff.
While some prefer technology, others put their faith in feathers. Conventional engineers now accept that fixed wings give far more reliable results. There are two quite separate parts to flying, staying in the air and moving forward. For birds, they have to go together. For us, they're better kept apart. So engines for thrust and wings for lift. What exactly is lift? Well, look at this. If you blow through the gap between the pieces of paper, you'd expect them to move apart. In fact, they come together because of lift. When the air moves faster through the center gap, the pressure drops. The air on the outside is not affected. There, the pressure is normal, but that's higher than inside, so the paper is forced in. The first aerodynamicists gradually discovered the aerofoil section, a design that is smooth, so there's little resistance, and yet is shaped so that the air moves faster on top than below. This gives a difference in pressure, lift. Birds' wings are aerofoils. They split the airflow so that it always moves faster on top of the wing, producing that all-important pressure difference. That difference in pressure gets bigger as the wing moves faster. At a certain speed, that pressure difference is greater than the weight of the bird or plane. Now the object has enough lift to fly. Tilt it slightly, and it has to go up. Pilots need to know various speeds when taking off. Rotate is the critical speed when the plane is capable of flying.
V1, rotate, V2, positive climb. Yeah.
What matters is the speed of the air over the wings, not how fast you're going over the ground. So wind is a major factor. For quick takeoff, head into it. This is a microlight aircraft. It's little more than a pair of wings with a high-mounted motorcycle engine driving a propeller. It needs an airspeed of only 20 miles per hour to get airborne, and the wind can make a dramatic difference. Just watch. The top plane will take off into the wind, the bottom one downwind.
10, 20. Airborne. 10. 20. Airborne.
The wind was light, but even so, downwind he needed 3 times the run, plus much more energy. And that's something birds know all about. A swan, for instance, needs an airspeed of around 20 miles per hour to take off. On a still day, it has to work much harder, but if there is any wind at all, a bird, like a pilot, will always take off into it to get the airspeed up. Now for a high-speed takeoff. The wings are flapping flat out. A pheasant can get out of trouble very quickly, but at a cost. Takeoff uses so much energy that it normally flies only for a few minutes. The bigger you are, the worse your takeoff problems, and the Corrie bustard is getting near the jumbo class. Its takeoffs are often long and tiring. The Andean condor, however, doesn't even attempt to take off on the level. Its wings are so long, they'd hit the ground if it tried to flap them. Instead, it looks for a hill, and then, by using gravity and any breeze, prepares to take, or rather glide, off. Of course, any gravity that can be used will be. This heron's takeoff is gravity-assisted and into the wind. Birds can overload themselves, a good gorging of food, and this vulture is now so heavy that it's not capable of flying any distance. To get back home, it must first digest and get rid of some of that food. Could an air traffic controller ever handle this? And yet, collisions are extremely rare because they all take off in the same direction. Whether it's 1 or 1,000,000, birds always take off into the wind. But these skills have to be learned. This young Goonie bird doesn't understand the full effect of wind, yet. And this young osprey still has things to learn, particularly about its own limitations. Though he got airborne, the wriggling fish seemed to unbalance him. Now he's doing it right. He's gripping the fish rigidly and holding it in line with the direction of flight, offering the least wind resistance. And wind resistance is something birds try to reduce. Feathers naturally assume a smooth profile. Legs are tucked in. Anything sticking out will increase that wind resistance or drag, and that will make flying harder. It's exactly the same for aircraft. If the wheels were not retracted, it would take almost twice as long for this 747 to cross the Atlantic. Even if it wanted to land now, it couldn't. With a full load of fuel, the wheels simply could not take the impact of landing. That's when aircraft have to jettison their fuel. Fuel is the biggest variable affecting the takeoff weight of aircraft. Concorde was designed to fly to New York with 100 passengers. To fly further would need more fuel, but that extra weight would mean fewer passengers could be carried. When Concorde leaves to cross the North Atlantic, 50% of its takeoff weight is fuel, which just happens to be the same as many small birds preparing to migrate. Weeks before migration, birds gorge themselves, building up reserves of fat. Some birds often double their body weight, and all that extra weight is stored fuel, fuel that will be slowly converted to energy during the flight. After a day or so of constant flying, fuel levels begin to get low and they need to take a stopover to refuel. then it's time for more very serious eating. It may take hours, it may take days, but the eating goes on until they have sufficient reserves of fat for the next hop in the journey. Then, when the weather is right, they set off for another flight that could easily be 1,000 miles before they need to refuel again.
2-3 on the ball. Roger 2-3, you clear us down the centre.
Of course, if an aircraft's range needs to be increased, it can be refueled in flight.
Contact wet for 4,000. Roger, 2-3 closing up. 2-3 fuel flows.
Though it's far too expensive a technique for civil airliners, it's vital for the military. But believe it or not, some birds also have in-flight refueling. They simply feed on the wing, and these swallows are refueling at an oasis in the Sahara. They are about halfway on their journey to southern Africa. For every hour that a swallow feeds, it builds up enough energy to keep flying for another 6 hours. From this oasis, the next hop will be about 1,000 miles. The necessary refueling will only take 6 or 7 hours. Of all the species that feed on the wing, the swift is the most incredible. It lives, and presumably in its own way sleeps, in the air, flying non-stop until it's 3 years old. It lands only when it's ready to breed. But the way anything flies is conditioned by the shape of its wings. With birds, each species has a uniquely shaped wing, a shape that's absolutely right for its lifestyle. And the same is true of aircraft. These have short wings that give maximum maneuverability at high speed. Razorbills have one of the smallest wings for their body weight, again for speed and maneuverability. A glider, however, needs maximum lift, and that means longer wings. And the U-2 spy plane used the same concept. Long, thin wings give plenty of lift, ideal for long, high flights. And the albatross is not unlike the U-2. Its wings are so long that it can get lift from even the slightest wind. Now, though, we've learned how to change a wing shape, like this tornado as it slows down. But we have a long way to go yet to equal the variable geometry of the gannet. But for some species, nature has evolved other, even more subtle ways of using the wings. These are shearwater. They get their name because they fly very close to the water. They're using a phenomenon called the ground effect. Air moving below the wing is pressed down onto the surface of the sea and reflected back, giving the bird extra lift. They can fly without having to work as hard. These pelicans are also using the ground effect. It's easy to show what happens. Flick a sheet of paper along a smooth surface. Usually it doesn't go far, but occasionally it seems to float. That's the ground effect. Could a plane use it? Well, this model was built by West German engineers to test just that. The full-sized prototype was tested on the Baltic Sea. By using the ground effect, it traveled 3 times further for each gallon of fuel than when flying normally. It might be that ground effect aircraft could be used for Coast Guard and search and rescue work. And the Russians are working on the same idea, though they want a plane to move over frozen rivers in winter. This is one of the most recent designs to make use of the ground effect, the man-powered Gossamer Albatross starting its record-breaking cross-channel flight. Experts now think that any successful man-powered flight must in part depend on the wings getting into the ground effect. But when any wing moves through the air, something else happens. Regardless of height, each wingtip produces a swirl. Normally invisible, it showed up clearly on a TSR-2 test flight. It's caused by the higher pressure air under the wing seeping out at the wingtip. All wings produce this swirl or vortex, whether they are fixed or flapping, and it seems that this is why birds fly in formation. Using models, researchers have developed a way of easily seeing the wingtip swirls. Each vortex continues well after the wing has gone. The air outside, where the wingtip passed, is forced upwards by the swirl, and it's this updraft that researchers think birds use when flying in formation. Each bird gets a little additional lift from the vortex of the bird in front. It's been worked out that a flock of 25 birds should be able to increase their range by 70% by flying in formation, and the theory is helped by one fact: the leader, who works hardest, keeps changing. But for us, the vortex produces problems. In this test, an executive jet is going to be deliberately flown into a 747's vortex. And the vortex can be a nuisance if you are crop spraying. It can ruin an even spread. One solution is to alter the shape of the wingtip itself, to break up the way the vortex starts in the first place. The experimental tip has 3 mini wings. Whilst you can still just see the swirl, it's now far less intense. By reducing the vortex, the mini-wings have also reduced the drag, so the engine does not have to work as hard to fly. But birds, of course, seem to have discovered that long ago. Large birds tend to spread out their primary feathers when gliding, presumably to reduce the drag. Gliding, though, is where we and the birds are most alike in our flying. Wings spread out for maximum lift and using air currents or gravity for power. A favorite location is the top of a cliff, with the air being deflected upwards. In the right spot, soaring is easy, and it's not surprising that we use exactly the same technique. To travel any distance, a glider pilot must find thermals, pockets of warm rising air, to lift him high up, ready for the long, gradual glides down. Birds know all about thermals. Some depend on them to gain height, and so glide rather than flap on cross-country flights, thus saving energy. But all flying, though, gliding or flapping, depends on having enough lift on the wings to support the weight, and this means keeping the flow of air above a certain critical speed. This test plane is deliberately going to fly below that critical speed. Then it will suddenly lose its lift. It's called stalling.
83 knots now. 82, 81, 80. There's quite a lot of bucket there. Out on the stick. 79. 78 next, or camera off.
This is what happens. As a plane flies slower, it can keep lift by tilting the wings more and more. This increases the speed of the flow on top of the wing, and so keeps up the pressure difference. But if the speed keeps dropping and the tilt goes too far, the smooth, fast flow on top of the wing breaks away. This wing has now stalled. There's just not enough lift to fly. Given enough height, a pilot is trained to get the nose down, to increase speed again, and to try and counteract any spinning. This can be quite a problem.
3, 4, speed staying fairly steep, 5, 6, stable, 7, recovering and it's responding slowly.
Spins from stalls are the major cause of fatal accidents in light aircraft. This test pilot eventually gave up trying to stop the spin and used his emergency system. All new planes are now test stalled. This is an American Thunderbolt. It looks as if it might go into a spin, but the pilot keeps it under control. They even put 747s through the same test. Here, at 15,000 feet, the pilot is cutting back the power towards the stall speed of 198 knots. The angle of the plane is getting steeper as he gets closer to stalling. That's it. The far wing went first, and that's how spins start. But the pilot keeps it steady, even though it's now dropping at 25 feet a second. This is an F-15 Eagle going straight up. The pilot is about to cut the power back. It's now falling back to Earth, tail first. Again, the pilot has to stop any spin and try to get lift back on the wings. And this is the stuff of nightmares, a Jaguar fighter tumbling out of the sky. The ball-like instrument in the center is supposed to show the horizon. He tumbled for 20,000 feet before he finally got it under control and then went on to land safely. And what of birds? Do they ever stall? We'll try an experiment on this pigeon about to land on a perch. At this moment, just before touchdown, there is virtually no lift in her wings. What she doesn't realize is that we are about to remove the perch. Her sensory mechanisms give an almost instant response. Full power without a hint of panic, even with the action slowed down 20 times. At real speed, it looks positively smooth, but dramatic stalls do occur naturally. This frigate bird cannot at the moment have any lift in its wings. But it recovers easily. This is a peregrine falcon on the attack. It's grouse that it's after. Missing the prey leaves it aerodynamically in an odd position, but for a moment only. These young sea eagles are having a fight. Clearly both must have stalled, but they recover with superb ease. One even seems keen to go back for more. And now, a mature sea eagle about to swoop for food. An intentional and perfectly controlled stall. But it's during normal landing that most birds display their greatest mastery of aerodynamics. Using slow motion again, you might see a sudden change on the front of the wing. Up comes what is called the allula, the bastard wing, and that has a dramatic effect on the way the air flows over the wing. Even slowed down 20 times, the change happens very quickly. Let's go back and look at it again. The allula pops up now. What does it do? Well, remember, this was the angle at which the wing stalled. Add an allula, and an amazing thing happens. The smooth airflow returns. The stall has gone. Now the wing can be tilted considerably further before it stalls again, and that means it can slow down and still fly. Not surprisingly, it's too good an idea to be just for the birds. They're called slats, and the original idea actually came from studying the way birds land. Slats have made flying far safer because they've allowed planes to land at much slower speeds without stalling, and nowadays they're used by aircraft of all sizes. But the next problem is how, in fact, to slow down. This pigeon fans its tail. This may give slight additional lift, but it mainly acts as an air brake. Similarly, aircraft droop flaps from the back of their wings. They are providing extra wing area and so more lift, but also increasing the drag, slowing it down. Here, braking is by webbed feet until just before touchdown. This vulture shows how to make a fast landing. And so does this Jaguar, dropping in on a motorway.
Good morning to you. Check through the mark of a 06. The wind is northerly less than 5.
This is surely the epitome of our high technology, and yet contemplate just how like a bird it looks. But more than that, the rules that our aircraft fly and land by are, give or take a bit, just the same as a bird.